Us, what's up? Good morning. How you doing? It's me back again, Analog Attack. Today I'm really happy to have Mr. James Sherry with me. How you doing, James?
Hey, I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's really good to see you.
And you, man.
And thanks for taking time out to come and talk.
No problem.
With me today. It's early morning,
right?
Talk
punk rock.
Early morning, right? 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock.
It's 10 o'clock. It's 20 past 10. I'm looking out the window. I live in East London in Hackney, and I'm right by the canal. And the sun is out today.
Beautiful.
The sky is quite blue.
Nice.
And things are feeling a bit better.
I'm glad to hear that.
After a dismal December and dismal January, I'm hoping that things will get better.
You've got they will, and and you've got your Electro Hippies t-shirt on.
I have in the spirit of the show. Yes, they were one of my favorites.
Did you ever see the Electro Hippie? Yeah, of course
you know what? I know I didn't. I never saw Electro Hippies. I saw pretty much everyone else.
Yeah.
But they rarely played London, and I was in London, and I think they only played a couple of times. And of course, when a lot of this stuff was happening, I was quite young. I started going to gigs probably regularly in about 86, 87.
Right.
And of course, there was so much happening in those days. You couldn't go to everything, and just didn't have the money. I look back at old gig lists, and I'm like, why the hell was I not at that? But you're like, well, because I probably went to one other gig that week, and that's all the money I had for. I
mean, I used to sort of sell things just to go to gig. I would sell records so I could go to gigs, because gigs were more important to me actually back then.
Oh, completely.
Right.
But I was really lucky to see a lot of stuff. I had a friend I met very early on, a guy called Steve Cotton, who used to do a fanzine called Crisis Point.
Okay, yeah.
And which you may remember. And he lived in Surbiton, and that's where I grew up in the Kingston area. And I think he put an advert in. I saw an advert for his fanzine in Kerrang or something like that, because I came into, like a lot of people, I came into hardcore and punk through metal. When I was 13 years old, I was all of Metallica, Anthrax, Exodus, Slayer. I was a thrash kid, and I would see those bands wearing hardcore t-shirts. I'm like, God, I need to hear Fear, or I need to hear GBH, or a lot of us got into it through that way, And so I would buy Kerrang, and then I would see they'd have a little fanzine list, and Steve Cotton was in there,
right?
And I wrote for his fanzine, and then we started writing to each other. And I remember I bunked off school one day, and I was supposed to be at school, and I cycled all the way from, he lived in further away in Surrey. I cycled all the way to a house, bunked off school, and we spent the day taping his records, and him showing me how he put together his fanzine, and I spent the day with him. But anyway, he used to put on gigs in Wimbledon, at this place called the William Morris Club. And without him doing that, I probably wouldn't have seen a lot of those bands, because Wimbledon was very close to where I lived, and a lot of the kind of hardcore gigs were happening in way over in East London, or places I hadn't even at that age didn't even know where they were. I'd I desperately want to go and see this gig, but where the hell is this place? But Wimbledon was close, so because of him, I got to see Heresy and Ripcord and Larm and all these bands, because he was putting all these gigs on. So he was a real inspiration for getting to see that kind of stuff, and to learning how to do a fanzine.
Right.
And so me and my two sort of friends at school, Jez and Paul Greer, who I'm in Dealing with Damage now, we're still playing music together.
Wow.
We started doing our fanzine Phobia, inspired by getting those early records and writing to the bands and all the usual stuff that we've all been through. I've got 3 of the issues here.
Wow.
You can see,
so you
the
were
first issue
16, 17 when you were doing that, right?
This is earlier. This is probably 14, 15. We were obsessed by Metallica, so this is 86.
Right.
So you can see this is the start of this is very more metal, but there's little bits of punk starting to happen, and then some later issues here, this is issue 4.
Wow, amazing.
And we got Deviant Instinct, Ripcord, Heresy, Desecrators, Broken Bones.
Is that all interviews or live review, interviews with
they're all mainly email interviews,
right?
Yeah, not email. Sorry, postal interviews. This one's got Visions of Change, Napalm Death.
that
satanic malfunctions.
Oh, that was back in
I'll come to them in a minute.
You would see Visions of Change and Napalm Death like on the same bill, those kind of gigs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Gigs were so mixed up.
I know.
But you know, basically this all comes from you know, finding addresses, you know, being able to buy Maximum Rock and Roll in Tower Records, you know, being able to buy something like that that gave you access to all the fanzine, the labels in a mainstream London record shop was, you know, I remember buying my first issue of Maximum Rock and Roll and taking that home and writing to every address in there. And then being just astounded when a band would write back, you know, because you just didn't, you know, I would send a really terrible questions. I mean, really young, like, you know, why did you form a band? You know, really this kind of stuff. Which is really basic. In fact, it always makes me laugh when because I've played in bands with Ed Shred Wen from Stupids and Bad Dress Sense and Sync for years now. We had a band called K-Line in the early 2000s, and we now play in Dealing with Damage together.
Right.
But I first met Ed when I sent him an email interview. And one of my first questions was, how much vinyl do you have out? And I spelt vinyl, V-I-N-A-L. And Ed just wrote, we have no vinyl.
Brilliant.
So that was my first contact with Ed. But that, you know, that was it. There was just that whole DI, you know, getting exposed to that whole world of fanzines, flyers, tape trading, and was so inspiring to a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid in his bedroom in the suburbs. You know, it was just I loved it. I spent hours sat in my room writing to bands and sending off for records and trading tapes. I got so obsessed with trading tapes, you know, as a precursor to the internet when you couldn't possibly listen to all the music. I remember, you know, tapes would arrive every day. Yeah. And I'd be spending my entire time just recording tapes. You know, sending off tapes.
I was exactly the same. And when I got my gyro, I'd just go down and get the pack of the cheapest C60s or C90s and you know, send them off to someone.
Quantity over quality.
Yeah.
You wanted, I just wanted as much as possible.
3 minutes left, you'd put like a rehearsal track by a band just to fill it up.
I mean, it's you know, it's amazing. There's stuff that I discovered, bands that I heard on those tapes that took me years to find the original records because it was so hard to get those records in those days. And of course, you know, those tapes and John Peel. I mean, everyone obviously, you know, raves about John Peel, but John Peel and Tommy Vance. So I used to listen to the Friday Rock Show, and as a very, you know, early teenager, because it was the only, you know, you get your 2 hours,
Friday night,
2 hours of rock on a Friday. But Tommy Vance started playing the occasional hardcore track. So the first time I ever heard Cryptic Slaughter, or I remember him playing The Eliminator by Agnostic Front.
Wow.
And it completely floored me. And then I started, so he would do, so that exposed me to a lot of that kind of stuff. And then I started hearing about John Peel, and that John Peel was doing sessions with some of these bands I was finding out, and so then I became obsessed with John Peel, you know, and recording all those sessions and everything that he did, you know.
Yeah, we're so
in fact,
similar.
You know, I've been, but a lot of us went through the same, because
Tommy Vance and then John Peel, and metal to hardcore.
But that's you know, that's what's kind of missing in the modern world, is we don't have those 2 or 3 figureheads in the mainstream exposing this stuff to a wide audience. Everything's just kind of, we're all just kind of screaming from a very flat playing ground. You know, in those days, John Peel playing a single was immediate attention. One little bit in the Enemy or in a Sounds or something like that, or Kerrang, got a lot of attention.
This is this is great, because at that time, for me, doing my little, you know, distribution, MCR, selling the Japanese tapes and everything, you were like, you know, I think it was you working for Metal Hammer at that time, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna send these Japanese demos to Metal Hammer. They're not gonna listen to these. They're not gonna review these, and you did, and that was like such a big deal for me back then.
Well, you know, it's still to this day, and this refers to what I was just saying. I still get messages from people saying, I used to read your stuff,
Yeah.
and discovered so many bands because of what you wrote in Metal Hammer in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm like, it's mad, but that's because
Yeah.
there was so few places to read about this stuff. I
Exactly.
mean, it's crazy. If you look at,
Mm.
when I was working at Metal Hammer, it looked like this.
Right.
But then inside,
Yeah.
there would be little bits on like underground music.
Mm.
And there were, there was very few places for those bands to get written about. So it had an impact.
It did.
The Metal Hammer thing came about because I was 17 when I was at college, and
Right.
the course I was on allowed loads of different work experience placements.
Right.
And I managed to get one at Metal Hammer, and the editor at the time was a guy called Chris Welsh, who was a legendary 50s, 60s, 70s melody maker journalist. Right. I mean, he was an amazing guy, so humble and lovely, and just no ego at all. And we'd go out for lunch, and he would tell these stories that would just have your jaw dropping, like, going to see the Sex Pistols with Keith Moon, playing drums with Led Zeppelin, hanging out with John Lennon, all that kind of, he was top of, but he was so encouraging. I can remember being in there for the first week, and I bought my fanzine and I showed it to him, and he was like, "This is great, you're doing this all yourself. He goes, we should be covering some of these bands." And I'm like, okay. So he was like, why don't you, he gave me a little column. He would give me records to review, and I would be allowed to one new band a month or something, while the rest of the time I was answering the phones and looking after the back issues and being the office boy,
Right.
And so it was very strange because, next to all these sort of hair metal bands, you'd have my little half page writing about, Deviated Instinct and Friends bands and whoever was doing stuff at the time, And so then people like yourself and all the little labels started sending me records, and I got more and more, involved in it. And that's kind of how that happened. But it was all, pretty much down to Chris Welsh,
Wow.
And so it's like that for the first year, and then things kind of accelerated from there, basically. Looking back,
Yeah, I mean, I just
that's
remember
kind of
just thinking they're not gonna touch these little Japanese tapes and stuff, and it was really big deal for me back then. Like John Peel and yourself, really sort of helping me out and giving a bit of a platform.
Yeah.
Fanzines are great, obviously, but just having that sort of bit of extra coverage, in a bigger magazine or on the radio was really, really important.
I would put I would put a address in my column, or someone who's put out a compilation tape or a demo or something, and they would get a lot of orders, because these kids were desperate looking for this stuff. It's I think, and there were so few outlets, like we were saying, sounds was a big one. In fact, I found this recently in my in my mum's shed. This was this was very controversial at the time, especially in the hardcore scene. Everyone hated the Britcore phrase. No one liked that. It's better than Britpop. But
true, yeah.
But this has got everyone in it. This is a really great roundup. And what year is this? This is 88.
88.
So the scene is in full flow at this point. So you got, they put Intense Degree, Sore Throat, Doctor the Crippins, all this stuff, it was amazing time. I mean, it started to die off quite soon after that. And then by 1990, a lot of those bands had, and the whole scene kind of went more melodic, and kind of snuff came in and all that kind of stuff, and a whole new wave of music. But for that moment, that was, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And all the touring bands. I mean, what are some of your memories? What are some of the best? I mean, I just think about BGK playing with the Stupids and things like that.
Yeah.
BGK from Holland. And did you go to that Bad Brains gig at the Astoria? Did you go to that?
Yeah, I went to. Well, that's the first time I saw them. I didn't. I mean, I would have loved to have seen them. They played at the Clarendon, and they played at the Electric Ballroom as well. In fact, the Clarendon show, the Stupid supported. Ed played that show, and he still tells me stories about that. And I saw them at Astoria and Subterranea and the Marquee when they were touring Quickness.
Right.
And they were just mind blowing. I mean, absolutely mind blowing.
I remember that Astoria gig. I think they didn't do an encore, and everyone was tearing down the curtains, and
You can see the footage on YouTube.
Can you? Oh wow.
Yeah, you can see them. The whole gig's on YouTube, and you can see people. They turn water cannons onto the crowd to disperse the crowd. Yeah. Supports that night were Bomb Disneyland and the Senseless Things. It shows you how mixed up things were. You know, let's not get on to Bomb Disneyland, but
you took the words right. Yeah, I met many a gig in Bristol. I was, they're playing again.
They seriously had a good agent. Do you know, Bomb Disneyland is still to this day between me and my friends and people that were going to gigs at that time. It's the running joke. You know, it's like them and Virus.
Oh man, I was just gonna say the same thing. They won't be watching. Like, we can say whatever we want.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But I remember them opening for Suicidal Tendencies at the Clarendon, and it was a funny night. But yeah, crazy. But I think there's one gig that really sticks out in my head is the one at the Willie Morris Club in Wimbledon that Steve put on, and it was Napalm Death opened. Right. It was their first ever London gig.
Wow.
And it was a Heresy who were just, I remember just being so floored by them. I became obsessed by them. Larm, so I'm so thankful to have got to see them because they were just incredible, absolutely amazing. And a band called Highball. Do you remember Highball? I think I'm pronouncing it right.
From Belgium.
Yeah. And that was just such an amazing gig, you know. Larm I was really obsessed by because one of the first, my little pile of records here. Where is it? The In the War Zone compilation.
Right.
This one.
Yes. You
ever have that?
I haven't got it now, but I did have it.
I bought this off one of my first when Digby at Earache.
Yeah.
Before he started the label properly and he just put out flexi discs. He did that. I've got them here as well. This one. Putrid Evil.
Yes. Putrid Evil.
That's got Stupid, Septic Death, Civil Dissident, and then the this one as well. That everyone knows this one, the Scrap Attic one.
Yeah. With Lip Cream on it, right?
Which is Hyrax, Lip Cream, Concrete Stock, Sacrilege, Execute. So he was doing that stuff at the time, but he was also running a little mail order.
Okay.
Get a little distro, and so he was one of the first people I sent. First person I would send off records for, and this was one of the ones I got, and it's got Straight Ahead, all the early, which is great, Attitude Adjustment, Pillsbury Hardcore, and Larm. So this is where I first heard Larm.
Oh man.
And then I saw them at Wimbledon around that time, and they were amazing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So let's go back
Good days.
to this is one thing that really stood out you were telling me about. It's like when you were 7 or 19 or 17, you got sent to Portland to live with Poison Idea. What?
Well, basically, so what kind of happened was what happened was because I was the office boy. I was doing all the running the errands, and Chris was allowing me to write about little things, give me little bits of coverage and a couple of album reviews and things like that. Yeah. And there's a guy called Anton Brooks who ran a publicity company called Bad Moon.
Okay.
And he used to do press for Sub Pop. And he basically, on one of my early times at Metal Hammer, he sent in a bunch of records, and it was Bleach, Super Fuzz, and all those Fluid, Tad, all that kind of stuff, which I was just like, and this is towards the tail end of '89,
right,
or middle of '89 or something, and I was just blown away by all of this stuff. And so I was going to all those early Sub Pop gigs in the sort of '89 and 1990, and so I got to interview Nirvana a lot when they first used to come over.
Right.
So when Nirvana exploded, I was just the office kid in the office, but I was the only one. When Nirvana exploded across the rock mainstream, I was the only one that knew anything about them really at the magazine, and I had all these interviews I'd already done. So in terms of like a leg up on the career ladder of rock journalism, that gave me that. Do
you remember that?
So
do you remember that first Nirvana interview? Do you remember it?
Yeah. They came to the office.
Wow.
They came to the office. Yeah. They came to the office, and Kurt was really quiet. He didn't say much, but Chris was very chatty. And I remember it was really funny because I wanted to get a photo done of them. To run with the feature.
Right.
I wanted to get our own photos, and the editor at Metal Hammer wouldn't. Oh, we can't commission a photographer for this. So I was like, okay. So the office manager, this German woman called Hannah Jordan, used to be a rock photographer or pop photographer in the 70s and 80s. And I said, oh, can you bring your camera in tomorrow? I've got this band coming in. I'd love for you to take a few pictures. And she was this kind of mad, eccentric at that point. I mean, I don't know what happened to her afterwards, but she was in her 50s at this point.
Wow.
And Nirvana loved her because she was so bonkers. We went up onto the roof of Metal Hammer and did this whole photo session, and they were goofing around and all this kind of stuff. And my God, I mean, she must have made a fortune out of those photos. Wow. Because when they exploded, those photos were everywhere, and they still pop up to this day.
Really?
And even now, I show them to people and go, I'm literally just standing there. You got, and God, if I'd known what was going to happen to Nirvana, I would have taken the photos myself, bought a camera, got them to sign everything I own. Had my photo taken with them. I had no, but it was just another. I loved them, but I didn't know what was going to happen at that stage. It was just another band.
When would that have been, like post Bleach but pre Nevermind, right?
It was that first interview was when Dave Grohl had just joined.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So it was when Sliver had come out, which he doesn't play on, but it was pre Nevermind.
Right.
And then I interviewed him one more time face to face just before Nevermind came out.
Okay.
And then a few times after all the chaos. But basically, yeah, that gave me the leg up to become a full-time music journalist.
Wow.
I was, not a particularly great writer, but I had the passion and the enthusiasm, and that kind of, got me through. I mean, I read back on some of the stuff and just cringe because I was really young though, and I didn't study English at school. I didn't go to college. I was an idiot obsessed by music. I barely knew how to string a sentence together, and still don't. But I had the enthusiasm and the passion to do it, and that's one thing that punk rock teaches all of us is if you do something with passion and conviction, it works, And so the Poison Idea thing, a guy called Rob Tennant, who I'm I don't know if you know Rob. You've probably
rings a bell.
He's one of my best friends and still is to this day, but he worked at Varna Solution.
Oh, there you go.
And he worked in the shop in West London, and then ran the label from there.
Okay.
So he signed Poison Idea, and he was one of the first guys, PRs, or that used to ring me up and make me interview these bands that he was working on. And they had the Stupids, the Hard-Ons, a bunch of whole really good Poison Idea, and a ton of great bands. And so he sent me this. Feel the Darkness was the first Poison Idea record they put out, so I got that, and it obviously sort of astounding record and completely floored me. And then they had a budget to send me over to Portland to go and interview them for a feature in Metal Hammer. So I think I was just 19. It's the first time I'd even been on a plane on my own, without family. And I can remember my dad dropping me off. They looked into Poison Idea a little bit, and they were pretty worried. They were like, these guys look mental.
Rightly so, I would say.
Yeah, and I was like, I remember showing them a few. They were like, "What is this band?" I was like, because my dad worked in music, so he wasn't ignorant to this stuff, but he was like, "Dude, these guys look crazy." I was like, "Yeah, it's gonna be fun." But I remember heading out there and being quite nervous, And Rob had given me a bunch of stuff to give to the band. A box of records. It was the Punish Me CD single, a box of those, and some press cuttings and a couple of records and a bunch of records for the band that he bought them, which I remember that exposed me. I mean, I'm going off on different things here, but they were totally obsessed with punk rock and all the kind of raw record stuff, bands like the Killjoys, all those obscure kind of English 77 bands. I heard them because Rob gave me those records to take over, and I recorded them before I gave them to the band. I was like, holy shit, this stuff's great.
Those like Pink Champion and that, they were like incredible record collectors, right? I mean,
they were. Their knowledge of punk rock was and their passion for it was amazing. But anyway, so I flew out there. Rob had given me this stuff, and I had like kind of like died dreadlocky hair at the time and shaved, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I remember turning up and the customs guy pulling me over, like, you know, where are you going? What are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm staying with these guys and da 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 da. And they, you know, they started going through my stuff and pulling out all the records. And the B-side of Punish Me is a song called Mario the Cop. Yeah, and the CD is like a cop's face with like, you know, the lyrics. And these guys were looking at this stuff, and I remember thinking, oh, this isn't good, because all of it, and they were going through the press cuttings, and I was like, yeah, this is very anti-authority, and you know, all of that stuff. And anyway, they were questioning it, and I was wondering whether they would let, but they suddenly he was like, "I'll just go through." So I was like, thank God for that. And I can't really. I think Jerry must have picked me up from the airport, and then I went back to Jerry's, and they were, I mean, God, they were so nice. You know, it was such. I was there for about 5 days.
Wow.
They really looked after me. I got to watch them rehearse.
For 5 days, you stayed at Jerry's house for 5.
Well, not Jerry's for the whole time. The first couple of nights, I remember I was at Jerry's for the first couple of nights, and I remember watching them rehearse. I got to play drums with them for a little bit. That was amazing. I got to have a go on Slayer's kit. I mean, it was a messy time, because trying to keep up with their drinking was just, and I was a kid, you know, I remember we went on the second night, we went to Pig Champion's house, and I can visually remember now being sat next to Pig, and I was, you know, yeah, I was completely off my face, and I remember just chatting to him for ages about my, you know, kind of like, you know, my life story at 19 years old. But they were so lovely, you know. But I remember on the third night, we were out at a bar, and Jerry said, "Look, you're gonna stay somewhere else tonight." I was like, "Okay." And suddenly that he goes, "You're staying at Slayer's house, and you may have to share a bed with him." I was like, I suddenly remember being like, "Oh my God, Slayer!" Because I don't think I'd met him, but he, you know, they built up this big thing like Slayer was gonna rape me or something. You know what I mean?
That'd be a good story to tell you.
And they were winding me up. And of course, I get to Slayer's house, and he lives with his mum in the beautiful house in the suburbs, you know, and it's like, you know, and he's like smoking weed in his bedroom through a toilet roll with a towel over it, so his mum can't smell it, you know. So you had this one hand, you know, this hardcore, you know, reputation. The other hand, of course, they're just like, you know, I can remember thinking that was really funny. And he was lovely. And I became, it was a heartbreaking when he passed away recently, because we were, you know, I saw him a lot in those years when they were coming over to play, and we, you know, became quite close. And then obviously he went to prison for a long time. And then when he came out of prison and discovered social media and reconnected with everyone, I was getting messages from him every day, you know, and he was you know, he was fully back on. He had that band Fetish, and I wrote, I interviewed them for Down for Life magazine that I do some writing for, and we were literally you know, back to chatting all the time. And obviously he wasn't going to be able to tour Europe anytime soon, but it was being talked about and all this kind of stuff. And he literally just sent me a box of records of the new Fetish stuff with a lovely letter and all this kind of stuff, when that literally arrived the day before the news came that he'd passed away. So it was very strange, like you know, that's a, you know, so it's very sad.
I think they were supposed to come to Japan, because my friend Soichi from the band Forward, that he was really good friends, and I think they were planning a little Japanese thing too at that time as well.
Yeah, he had so many projects on the go. Honestly, it came so out the blue, you know, and obviously he'd lived a hard life, and his body had probably taken a battering, but it was you know, it was totally unexpected. And you know, social media is such a weird thing when people die now, because you're left with, you know, these unanswered messages and threads and comments, and you know, it's very strange.
And friends who died, birthdays come up and things like that.
So it's very weird. I still think about Slayer a lot, and the whole Poison Idea experience was great. I went out there again after they put out Blackout Vacant. And this time I went with Rob, and it was when they were doing their last gig. What was then their last gig in '93, the Pigs Last Stand. And we went out to see that gig and review it and do an interview thing. And I went with Rob, and we had such a good time. But in fact, I think I've got.
Oh,
sure. I should have sorted this stuff out better. I've got cards in there.
Everyone's the same, so I'm the same. So, where's that thing that I was?
That's me on the second trip with Jerry and his partner then, Mary.
Oh,
wearing my Bugs and Drugs t-shirt.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and Bugs and Drugs t-shirt. Yeah.
Looking like I might have had a few, and Jerry looking cool as fuck.
He looks
with a big hard-ons poster behind him.
Yeah. I always loved how the hard-ons and Poison Idea were like really good mates. Like even though they're different musically, like
I guess that came about because of the label connection and stuff like that. But
there you go. We've got to talk about
honestly, but
I
was going to say, just seeing Jerry these days and how well he looks and how he's turned his life around and how happy he is, happily married and all this kind of stuff. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing because he could have very easily not been here. He was in quite a state in the early, a few years back, and has really turned it around. He's lost so much weight. I mean, it's amazing.
Well, Poison Idea came to Japan in like 2002, and he wasn't in the best.
He would have been
condition.
Yeah,
but they came back again a couple of years ago, and he actually apologized. He apologized from the stage. He's like, we had to come back to like do it properly, like because
he was. I think that around that period there was a few of those instances. He was just he was not.
But he seems in really good health. And
great.
His Facebook's amazing, like making cakes and stuff.
I mean, it's crazy. How could you ever have predicted this stuff? It's like I was saying to you earlier, getting pictures of Colin Conflict's cat on WhatsApp, or getting, and seeing Jerry doing home baking with Jerry A at home in,
But
how
it's
beautiful
good
is that?
It is good because
when I was a teenager, I fully believed and bought into the whole, Poison Idea was so nihilistic. I mean, they did not give a fuck. It was, we will take any drug, drink anyone. We do not give a shit. And we will do it till the maximum level. And so, it's impossible to imagine that all these decades down the line, we'd be watching Jerry A go live on Facebook, cooking an apple strudel.
Yeah, I love it. It's nice. We've
got absolutely love it.
You must have been at the Ulu gig, right, with the hard-ons and still one of the best gigs I went up to in London. I mean, because we saw them.
That was I mean, that was the first time they played. I think they played maybe one night before at TJ's in Newport.
I went to that, and it was so amazing. I just got the National Express coach up to London the next morning, and went to that one as well.
Oh man, I bet that was amazing.
Yeah,
I'd love to have gone to that. I should have gone to that, but again, I probably wouldn't want to play in London. I'll go to that. Yeah. But I do remember. I did the Hard-Ons played after Poison Idea, didn't they?
They still, to this day, they were like, why do we have to play after the Poison Idea?
I just remember it was Battle of the Fire Breathing, wasn't it?
Yeah, but also like people forget about Les Thugs, the French band.
Brilliant band. And again on Vinyl Solution, that's another one I can thank Rob Tennant for. He would have got them on those gigs, and they didn't play new TJs, did they?
No.
In fact, I know who played that gig. It was Pleasant Valley Children. Do you remember them?
Yeah.
Amazing band. I only remember that because I've got the poster, I've got the flyer somewhere, and I loved that band. PVC, they were so good.
I was like, I mean, TJ's doesn't have a stage.
Yeah.
I mean, right at the front, like right in front of Jerry A. I mean, it was like, absolute incredible.
Those gigs are amazing, and then they kept coming back, and they must have toured the UK 3 or 4 times, and all of those gigs were phenomenal.
One thing,
they're
the Vinyl Solution wore all the time. That with the alternate. Whose idea was that? Was that like anything? Was that Rob's idea or?
I suspect that would have been Rob's. Yeah, I mean, he would have probably pushed to do a different version or something. Yeah,
so good. Such an amazing.
And it's great seeing all these records coming out again, because Jerry's got obviously, he's got the American Leather imprint still, and he's been putting them all out again with extra tracks and lovely, really nice double vinyl, and legendary band. Yeah, one of my favorites, and that all comes from around that same time. It's funny. I remember when Nirvana came to the office, the first thing Kurt noticed was my Poison Idea poster on our little office wall. He's like, "Oh, dude, you like Poison Idea?" I was like, so instantly we had a kind of, you know, he was like, "Oh, this might be okay. This guy's got Poison Idea poster." Because they're all from the same, you know, Portland, Seattle. It was that whole kind of scene, you know. It was all Poison Idea played with Nirvana, and it was all kind of mixed up.
Yeah. Wow. And you've been like working in PR. You've got your own PR company, right, James? You've been running for.
Yeah, but I mean that came from writing for years, you know, doing. Because I worked after Metal Hammer went down, collapsed initially at the sort of, when was it? Sort of 93. And it got rebought by a different publisher in about 95, but for a while it wasn't there. So in 93 I joined this band called Done Line Down, who were more, it was a kind of punky edge, but it was more of an indie kind of thing, but it was great. We, you know, I did that for like 3 years, and we toured and did 2 albums and 3 Peel sessions, and you know, toured. We played with like Girls Against Boys. It was that kind of, you know, that kind of world a little bit, and some lots of terrible English indie bands that we were supporting at the time. And then I worked at, I got to write for Kerrang for a long time as a freelancer, so I did that for quite a few years. So all the time I'm, you know, talking to PRs and learning, you know, all that stuff. And my friend Zach, who was in one of my early bands with, and we, you know, went to college together, and we were, you know, gig adventures together. We worked on various different things together, and it was sort of early 2000s, after this website we'd been working for collapsed. He was like, "Well, we should start a PR company, you know, all these labels and bands and that world." It kind of went from there, really. You know, it's and it's been something we've done ever since, and we've been lucky to work with so many different, I mean, I've ticked a lot of boxes of getting to work with bands I really love, and we do a lot of work for a lot of small labels and bands, but then a lot of work for like Epitaph and all the sort of bigger punk labels and different kinds of music and stuff. So it's been cool. Yeah.
Bad Brains too, right? You said were doing PR for
I did the 2 albums that they did in the 2000s. I mean, that was a, you know, again, I was doing a lot of work for Megaforce at that time. So like a lot of reissues and some other stuff, and then Bad Brains came up. I was like, yeah, but I mean that was a whole nother experience, because HR at that point was you know, not at his best, and they played at the Astoria. I'm trying to remember what year this was, 2006. I think about 2006. And it was the record label said to me, "Look, you know, he'll be line up a load of interviews and photos the day of London. We'll do all this stuff." And I was like, "Okay, great." So I had all this stuff lined up with like quite big, you know, mainstream magazines and various different stuff. But HR was just like, you know, it was not happening. You know, every interview kind of collapsed. He wasn't, you know, he was not in the best place. And the gig, you know, it was packed, and the band were rocking, but you know, HR came on stage, pushed, you know, all of his luggage to the front of the stage. We had his bags around him, had like a towel over his head, was strumming a guitar that wasn't plugged in, and was just singing so quietly, barely singing, you know. And it was kind of a heartbreaking thing. And that happened a couple of times, you know. It's well known and documented, the issues around that time. So that was quite a stressful experience. And then everyone was just bitching about the gig and how terrible they were and all this kind of stuff. But it's funny, he toured here 2019. They came and played Rebellion and did a short UK tour. A friend of mine, Spike, a drummer called Spike, who's played in loads of bands. He was in a band called Alternative Attack.
Oh man,
he was played in The Damned. He's played in tons of bands. He put a tour together, and HR was great. You know, he was obviously, he's afraid, you know, he's an old guy now, but and it was pretty much all reggae stuff. He's really comfortable doing reggae. He can't do hardcore anymore, obviously. You know, it's like, I feel honored to have seen them when he was at his back flipping power, you know. It's funny, actually, I spent last week I interviewed Daryl from Bad Brains.
Oh wow.
Because I write for this magazine called Down for Life, and it's done by the people who do Viva La Rock and used to do Big Cheese, and it's kind of like, it comes out like 4 or 5 times a year, and it's more hardcore focused, and my friend runs it, and so I do some writing for them. And Bad Brains are reissuing all of their catalogue on their own label now. They've got the rights back to everything. So I interviewed Daryl, and it was great. He was because it was the end of a really shitty week, and he was just, it was just really nice talking to him, because he was just full of love and PMA and all that stuff. You know, I came away from it thinking, feeling a bit more positive.
Excellent.
So I've actually, this weekend, I was writing the piece this weekend, so I've had a head full of bad brains the last couple of days.
Brilliant.
It's been great.
You mentioned Rebellion Festival. What's your involvement in Rebellion Festival, James?
Just PRing it, publicizing it, doing the press, online and magazines, and I've done it for the last 4 years. Obviously, it didn't happen last year. And we don't know what's going to happen this year. But I mean, I absolutely, the people that run that festival, it's big, but it's 100% independent DIY still. Darren and Jenny, you know, Darren comes from putting gigs on in the 80s. He's a permanent fixture on the scene, and what they've built up with Rebellion is astounding. Honestly, if you go, you see Blackpool taken over by 10,000 punks from all around the world. It's quite a sight, man.
I've always wanted to go. Do you go every year? Have you been going every year?
I mean, I have done since I've been working on it, it's great. It's such a good experience. I hope they can do something this year. We're waiting to find out what the possibilities are.
One of my, seeing Cock Sparrow at Rebellion is something I'd like to witness. Have you seen?
Right.
Oh,
yeah. The big one for me was last year in 2019. Fear played.
Oh wow!
And Fear the record was again one of the first US punk albums I got, and I was completely obsessed by it. And they never came to Europe ever, and so to see them finally come to the UK all these years later, and I got to meet Lee Ving, and he was such a nice guy. You know, you had this image of him in like decline, spewing out this filth and just being so belligerent, and now he was just a sweet old man, you know. It's just like, but they were great. They absolutely rocked it, you know, and it's amazing to see them, and I hope they can come back again. I mean, after the gig, he was so full of, we'll be back, we won't wait another, you know, won't be 40 years. And now you wonder what's going to happen with these older bands. Will they get to tour again? You know,
don't the Damned have like those shows lined up, don't they? That the Damned have like the original lineup 3 or 4 nights. That's coming up.
I've worked for the Damned for a long time as well. I've done PR for them, and so I'm you know, inside that world, and I mean, let's hope that those gigs can happen. You know, it's the original lineup. It'd be amazing to see. I mean, it's a short tour. It may lead to more. We don't really know what's going to happen. You know, because it's just how gigs are allowed to happen by that point. You know, are they going to be allowed to do full capacity gigs, or is it still going to have to be socially distant, all that kind of stuff? We just got to wait and see. So, but you know, if they can't happen when in July, then they'll be pushed back to later in the year or next year. You know, so it will happen eventually.
Who's sort of lined up for Rebellion this year at the moment?
Well, it's supposed to be, you know, like the big Circle Jerks are supposed to play, Bad Religion are supposed to play, and the problem is, I think Rebellion will be able to do something. It's just whether bands are going to be flying around the world in August, and at the moment it doesn't seem likely, does it?
No.
So it may be that there's, you know, something with English bands, or we just got to wait. We don't know. We've got to wait and see. We've got to wait and see what happens. Hopefully more will become clear over the coming weeks.
The last time I saw your face on the big screen was in the Soak the Stamps documentary. How did you get involved with that? I was like, oh God, it's James. That's such a good documentary. I just wish it was longer.
Well, again, that was a really random thing. So because of working in press, I knew, you know, all the people at Vice magazine, and there was this guy at Vice called James Knight back then, and he was really into hardcore. And so we obviously bonded, and we go to gigs together and stuff. And it was when like Vice were putting out records by Fucked Up and Off and things like that. And I was working on Off and Black Lips and the sort of punkier bands they were doing. And he'd been contacted by this girl that was working for Channel 4 and had been commissioned to produce a short run of music documentaries, 20 minutes each one focusing on a very specific scene. So they did one about drum and bass or and they wanted one about hardcore. And so James messaged me and was like, look, can you hook me up with can we come in and talk to you about it and get your advice, and can we, you know, you can help us with contacts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they came in and they wanted to do, it was too broad. They were trying to do, they were talking originally about trying to include, you know, Converge and all these, like the whole history of hardcore, and and I was just like, you got 20 minutes, you're not even going to be able to. Right. I was like, why don't we focus on one specific moment in time and do that, you know. So let's do, you know, Brickcore. That sounds, you know, let's do that John Peel explosion of 86, 87, 88, and let's talk about the Stupids and Ripcord and Heresy and all that kind of stuff. And they were down with it, basically. So, you know, hooked them up with Tommy Stupid and Baz Ballum from Ripcord and Heresy, and they, you know, obviously did loads of their own other stuff, and then they came in and interviewed me, and we worked on it together, and they obviously edited it and down to 20 minutes.
Right.
And I thought it came out good.
I thought so too.
You know,
it's pretty good.
It was done with, it was done right. And you know, it wasn't long enough. Everyone, the only complaints after it were people going, you know, you didn't include this band or that band or and I was like, it was too, you know, South centric or London centric or whatever. But you know, it's like, well, we had 20 minutes and we did what we could, you know. And it's there was talk after it about doing an extended, because they had tons of footage, obviously, that wasn't used.
Yeah.
So there was talk of doing an extended version to come out on DVD or something, but that never happened. I mean, but maybe one day, you know, all that footage is out there. But I'm really happy it was done, and it's nice that it sits on YouTube.
It's so good. You know? And I really like Bedis as well. He's so good in it. Bedis from the Cowboy Killers.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome. I love the Cowboy Killers. You know, they were fantastic, and he's still very, you know, he's doing his thing still. So he's got his record shop.
He's still doing the shop, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, definitely. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what whether it's open or not at the moment, or whether I'm sure he's doing mail order and stuff, but he's still involved, you know.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And I just noticed that you've done the Conflict. Let's talk about Conflict. You've just done the liner notes for the Conflict box set.
Yeah. Well, Conflict, I mean, I got into, you know, being exposed to an anarcho punk as a 14-year-old was just, you know, mind blowing, really, you know. And I kind of got into it because there was a record shop in Kingston where I grew up called Beggar's Banquet, and I used to go there every Saturday and buy whatever records I could, you know. Yeah. And as I was just starting to get into hardcore and punk through the thrash metal thing, they had a big 7-inch section in Beggar's Banquet and a little anarcho punk section, and those records were cheap. So I remember I had like £5 pocket money, and I bought in one go, without having heard these bands before, purely because the records look punk and they look cheap. I bought Conflict, This Is Not Enough, Neither Is This 7-inch. I bought the Anthrax Crass 7-inch. I bought the Amiga Tribe 7-inch, and I bought the MDC Crass 7-inch, all for less than a £5, you know, because they were like all of them would pay no
75 pence or like something like that, right? Yeah. And
I took this little pile of 7-inches home and got home and I remember putting the Conflict single on first, and it's that song, This Is Not Enough, Stand Up and Fucking Fight, and it's still to this day like 3 minutes of most intense fury I think I've ever heard. I can remember putting it on and just being like, what is this? This is so angry. What, my God, this is like a whole new, and you fold it out and read all the words and da-da-da. So, you know, I got some Crass records, and Crass were, you know, Crass, I loved it, and they split up by that point. So at that point, it was all about Conflict. Conflict were very active as I got into them. They were doing, you know, they were the you know, very active. And then of course it's, you know, getting the Subhumans records, and they kind of split up by that point as well. But Dick had started doing Culture Shock and Citizen Fish and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that whole world and Conflict were, I mean, the Ungovernable Force, those Conflict records are so powerful still. And you know, Colin is a controversial character. I mean, he's always been controversial. But I you know, I think his heart's in the right place, and he's a really lovely guy when you talk to him. So I was asked by Mark at Captain Oi, and I know the people at Cherry Red, we're going to be reissuing all the records. They do all hundreds of these punk bands, the clamshell, they call them,
That's
clamshell
it.
box sets,
Yeah.
where you get, you know, they're great value. You get, you know, a band's entire back catalogue on CD with a nice booklet in a clamshell box for less than 20 quid, you know, however much they are.
Yeah.
So they're like, look, we're doing the whole Conflict back catalogue, where you write the sleeve notes. So yeah, and in December last year, I spent a long time on the phone with Colin, going through the history of Conflict, and it was very entertaining. You know, he's great to talk to, and he's really funny. He's a proper geezer. He is. I think Dick Lucas called him the used car salesman of anarcho punk. And that's kind of spot on. It's really funny, but he is very passionate, you know, and the whole, you know, animal rights thing, and he lived it. I mean, he did live it. There's no, it was real. It was real. Conflict was real. And those records inspired so many people. So, you know, it doesn't really matter if people think he's a twat these days. What they did in the 80s inspired so many people. It's like, well, what have you done? Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, it's you can't take that away, you know.
Conflict were just like, I mean, just musically, I mean, just so different from all the other, you know, anarcho bands. Just real like powerhouse, hardcore punk band, right? But you know,
it was ferocious.
Absolutely,
it was just like, you know, they were next level. And what I learned, and was really interesting actually doing the sleeve notes, and I didn't know this, is how talented Colin is as a musician. He plays drums, bass, guitar. A lot of that Conflict stuff, him and Paco wrote together, the drummer. Colin would demo that stuff and play everything, and then would take it to the band, and they would, you know, learn the tracks. So I didn't know that. And another thing he told me, and I don't know how, you know, he told me that when they went to record Ungovernable Force at Rockfield Studios in Monmouth, which is a very famous residential studio in Wales, where Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath,
Hawkwind,
Conflict went and recorded the Ungovernable Force there, because Jungle, you know, gave them an advance of however much to go and record, so they had the money to go and do it properly. But he tells me that they turned up at the studio and the album was barely written. Like, most of the Ungovernable Force apparently was written and made up in the studio on the spot. He told me that they obviously had some bits, but apparently he said when they arrived at the studio, the tape op sound guy bounced up to Colin and said, right, where do you start? And apparently Colin went, right, we haven't got much written, right? So you better fuck off for about a week, because we need to write some music. And so basically he sent him away and said, look, you know, we need to get on and write this album. And then I just couldn't believe that, because you listen to the record and it's like, this doesn't, I mean, it's genius.
It is amazing. Yeah.
And it's still, you know, to this day, it sounds amazing. In fact, my son, who is now he's going to be 21 this year, but when he started getting into punk when he was like 14, and you know, like any aging punk dad, you want your kids to like the music, and stuff. You know, he started he started liking you know, started out as he should with things like NoFX and Descendants, and you know, loved all that stuff, and then started showing more and more interest in. And I just remember there was a period of giving him like the Golden Force, giving him the first MDC album, giving him Death Church, Rudimentary Penile, all those Subhumans, and it just blew his mind.
Brilliant.
And now he's off on his own. Now he's totally into like grindcore and power violence, and he's coming to me with bands I've never heard of. You know, it all flipped. He's like, Dad, have you heard the new Fucking Eat Shit You Bastard album? And I'm like, no, man, I'll check it out. You know. And but it just shows you how timeless and powerful those records still are, that all these years later a 15-year-old kid can in 2021 can play that record and still be floored by it, you know. It is amazing.
It is. James, have you got any more records with you that are important to you, that have been important to you through the years, that you're really fond of?
Well, I mean, there's one band I want to give credit to.
All right.
I don't know if you know this band. This band are called 2000 Dirty Squatters. Do you know this band?
I do, yeah. Someone I lived with was in that band for a while. George from Zygote did a bit of time. And he was living with me when he was in that band, and he rang up a huge bill on the MCR phone calling.
Right. Gary.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Gary Disease.
Yeah.
Now,
Uh,
now 2000, that album is amazing, by the way. It's the mix of like hardcore and like festival Hawkwind Psych is just you know, no one sounds like them, but they were chaos and they had a bad name. You know,
I know.
Like,
I mean, even
but it
just
was
from
mainly
like not living with them, but living with someone that was in that band, just was like the stories.
It was the people around them as well as the whole Hackney Hell Crew thing. And but anyway, when I was living at home with my parents at 14 years old, this girl moved in opposite called Kerry Elmsley, and her dad was an air pilot, and they'd moved from New Zealand to live in England.
Right.
And she was like this goth girl, and I became friends with her, and I'd go over to her house, and we'd sit and listen to music together. And she had Nevermind the Bollocks, she had Raw Power, she had like Velvet Underground records and stuff like that. So it exposed me to all that kind of stuff. And then as we started going to gigs together, and I went to, she was a real goth girl, so we'd go and see like Zodiac Mindwarp or Doctor and the Medics or stuff that was happening at the time. And then she started getting into like some hardcore stuff, but she met and started dating Roscoe, who was in a band called Screech Rock, who used to play with 2000 DS all the time.
I've seen them a couple of times at festivals.
Yeah, screechy
Mm-hmm.
kind of, and then started hanging out with 2000 DS, and so I went to see them, and at this point they were living in like all the trucks were in a car park in Camden, and so I was again 16, 17 years old, and they just blew me away completely. There's so many stories, because I hang out with them quite a lot, and got very friendly with Gary, the singer. I mean, it's so sad what happened to him. He died all those years ago. Died in a car crash.
Oh, okay.
It was a car head-on collision. Lost his, it was awful. Yeah.
Oh.
This is going back. I think he must have been about 13 years ago, maybe 12, 13 years ago. But I stayed in touch with him all the time, even in the days of early 2000s, the K-Line, and he was in a band called Crowzone, and we did some gigs together. And I know that DS had a bad reputation and there are bad people around him, but he was so inspiring that I was in complete awe of the life that they led. I mean, the whole traveling convoy free festival thing, siphoning petrol, stealing lead off churches, scrap the church, feed the poor. All this stuff to a kid. I was just like, these guys this is like something from Mad Max. I mean, it was properly bonkers. I was just so like, it was like, I was in awe of it completely. And the album was brilliant. They were phenomenal live. I mean, it's kind of, I at the time of doing Phobia and eating 2000 DS and stuff, me and my friend were going to start a record label, and I wanted to put out a 7-inch single. And he had a job, my friend Dave Osborne, and he had a job. So he had some money, and we stupidly gave 2000 DS a couple of £100 to go and record 2 songs for their side of what was going to be a 2000 DS Screech Rock split single. And I think we gave Screech Rock some money to record. And Screech Rock managed to record their side, 2000 DS. I don't know what happened, but the record, I mean, we never got the recording. It's like, then Gary was like, we need more money. We've messed up the recording. We need to go and do it again. And I was like, I don't have any more money. So the record never came out. At one point it was going to be Decadence Within were going to be on the other side. And I've still got the tape, the reel-to-reel tape of the track that was supposed to go on there from Ian Glasper, who sent it to me. But by that point we'd lost momentum, and the record never came out. But 2000 DS. But I remember going to those gigs. I remember going with my friend to the car park. They were all had the trucks passed in, and we were sitting on the truck with them, and all these gnarly, crusty punks. And I was 17 years old, and they were smoking a chillum, a big pipe thing, and they were like, you smoked a chillum before? And I was like, yeah, of course, I do smoke chillums all the time. Pass it over, and we're like smoking on this chillum, and oh my god, I literally have no idea what happened for the next 6 hours. My friend who I was with, he was like 2 years younger than me. He passed out under the pub table in the pub they were playing, and I couldn't get him out. I remember being in the truck at one point driving No, we were like gone, completely tripping on this chiller thing. It was absolute havoc. I don't think we managed to get home. I think we woke up in their squat. I don't know. It's all quite distant memory, but yeah, they fucked us up.
So
Good and proper.
Yeah, this will be a good question to end on. So, living with Poison Idea or hanging out with 2000 DS, which was the more dangerous?
I mean, I'd say they were on pretty equal terms, really.
Equal.
I feel lucky to still be here sometimes. But great people. I mean, lovely. You know, it was never like, you know, no proper aggro. It was all good.
Yeah. So you surprised me with that. I was thinking, well, what's he going to bring? That was one of the last things I was expecting.
Well, because they're a band that's because they have kind of a bad reputation. They are kind of a forgotten band, you know.
Yeah.
But what they actually did in terms for underground music and the free festival circuit and that whole thing was amazing, you know.
Yeah.
Gary worked so hard on all that stuff,
right?
And they put a bunch of records and.
Right. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
That's a great.
I thought I'd give them some attention. Squat the lot.
Squat. Yeah, that's a great way to end, actually, because totally left field.
Yeah.
2000 DS.
I mean, I wrote about 2000 DS in Metal Hammer, so I always laugh at the thought of some metal kid somewhere has got a copy of Squat the Lot because I wrote about it in Metal Hammer.
But that whole festival scene,
really funny.
Like, you got me thinking now. I mean, even bands like Here and Now and bands like that were kind of important too. And there's tons of bands.
Yeah, we're Here and Now toured with ATV.
Yeah.
You know, Mark Perry, and they did that split album. It was all kind of mixed up. You know, it was all alternative culture and underground music.
Yes.
I think that's something that, you know, obviously we touched on earlier is how mixed up it all was back then. You know, everything's very, you know, genre specific now. And back then it was the lineups were completely mixed. You'd see all kinds of different bands with different, you know, that weren't suitable or whatever, you know, and things were much more mixed up. It was all just in one thing. It was good.
Yeah. All right, James, we had such a good time.
All right, man.
I hope you've enjoyed
it. It was good fun. It was good to go through some of that
2000 DS.
Yeah, get it on. All right, man.
All right, everyone.
I'll miss you in a bit. That was good fun. Thank you very much.
Cheers, James.
See you all soon. Stay safe.
Yeah. Until next time, stay healthy. Stay clean.